Hey, and welcome back. I consider myself extremely fortunate to be in a position where I'm gigging constantly, especially in peak seasons like summer and early fall. In a typical year, I might play anywhere from 150 to 250 shows. And with that, there's a fair amount of times where I'm doubling or tripling up with gigs all on a single day. I recently had a day like this where I had 3 gigs, and I decided I'd take you along for the journey and show you how I make it all work. So the day started out around 10:30 a.m. with packing up for the first round of gigs. On days where I have more than one gig, I sometimes need to be creative with equipment and set up for a later gig earlier in the day. So before I left to head out for my first gig, I packed up all my drums, PA, and lights needed for the final gig of that night. After I had everything packed up in the Prius, I went inside to collect some of the smaller pieces I'd need for my first gig, like my conga mics, mic clips, and some aux percussion. I brought all of this up to my backpack, along with both of my iPads and all of my audio-video gear I'd need to film and record everything going on today. After some downtime, I grabbed my congas and loaded them up into the car, and at this point, the Prius was packed full with a drum kit, PA, sound equipment, lights, and anything else I might need. I also packed an extra drum throne, just because I sit way lower when I play congas, and it's annoying to mess with the memory lock and the height on my regular gigging throne. I was barely able to fit everything in the car, but I got creative and threw one of my congas in the back seat with the PA, and the other strapped into the front seat next to me. I had a little bit of time before I had to take off, but once it was around 11:45 a.m., I packed up my backpack and left to head out for my first gig. The first gig up was a 1-hour set with a traditional salsa band I play with called Salsa Manzana. This show was part of an event called Rhythms of the World in Appleton, Wisconsin, about 30 minutes from where I live in Oshkosh. We were originally scheduled to play outside, but unfortunately there was rain in the forecast, and the event was moved indoors to the Fox Cities Performing Arts Center. Within a few seconds of pulling into the loading dock, my fellow bandmate and friend, Andy, pulled up, and we went into security to get signed in and check out the venue situation. After that, it was time to load in some equipment and meet up with the rest of the band. Although it probably would have been much cooler to play outside, the PAC is a pretty amazing stage and has plenty of space to hang out backstage. We had a fair amount of time to kill before we could go set up on stage, so it was nice to catch up with some of my fellow members of Salsa Manzana and peek at some of the other cultural performances happening. We took the stage about 1 p.m. and started our 1-hour set shortly thereafter around 1:15. Unfortunately, the original plan for sound had to be scrapped with the new venue, and we didn't get much at all in terms of miking or monitors, so it was a bit of a struggle to hold this music all together with all the intricate rhythmic balance in this style. We survived the gig despite a few rough moments, and right about 2:20, we finished out our last song, and I quickly packed up to head back down to Oshkosh. I hit the road a touch after 2:30 to head to the Payne Arts Center and Gardens, where I'd be playing later that night for their biannual fundraising gala. This is an extremely high-profile event and a great opportunity for my R&B funk band, the Pocket Kings, to play in front of a lot of important people in our area. I made it to the Payne right around 3 p.m. and was ready to unload and set up. With this band, I typically do the booking and managing with the client and coordinate with our group. On most of our gigs, I also run sound and lights while playing drums, so there's a lot of equipment to haul and set up. I do get an extra cut of these gigs for doing this, so it's worth my while, but it does mean I'm oftentimes loading into events like corporate functions or weddings quite a bit earlier to not be a burden during the event. In most cases, I can haul all this equipment in 2 trips if I have my trusty rock and roller cart. 1 trip with all the drums, and a second for the PA, lights, and anything else we need. Over the years, I've invested in equipment that is not only capable of handling the shows I do, but is also really compact and concise. I don't have a ton of room without a trailer or any help hauling stuff, so it's important to me to have equipment that allows me to be as efficient as possible. The venue here is a beautiful old mansion that was converted into an art museum, and I think our trumpet player put it best when he described this gig as playing at the Bat Cave. It took about an hour to unload, haul, and set everything up, and my schedule going from my second to third gig was going to be extremely tight, so it was essential that I get everything set up, mic'd, and tested as much as possible before heading out. Just after 4 p.m., I was able to leave the Pain and head back home, which was only about 10 minutes away. But before getting home, I made a quick pit stop at Subway to grab a late lunch. I got home around 4:20 p.m. and started by unpacking all the gear from the Salsa gig. Next, I went downstairs to scramble together some extra hardware and pieces for my next gig. I usually have all my gigging hardware collected nicely in a bag, all up near my garage in a small storage room, but with my main gigging rig already set up across town, I needed to compile a B rig for this next gig. Luckily, this gig was just a background jazz trio performance for a private party, so I only needed a small kit, but this still got me thinking about maybe having some more grab-and-go ready hardware for the future. I had enough time for a quick shower and time to let the dogs out and feed them dinner, but then it was pretty much time to go. I made sure to pack some extra dress clothes, just in case I were to spill something or find that my current attire was not dressy enough. Fortunately for me, this second gig was literally a half mile away from my house at the local yacht club, so travel wasn't really a factor to worry about, and I left right around 5:15 p.m. and got over to the venue at something like 5:17. At this point, you can really see the rain starting to come down as I was beginning to unload, but since I play at this yacht club all the time for different events, I knew exactly where I could sneak a great parking spot right by the elevator entrance. After I got upstairs, I was able to take my time setting up. I did run into some parents of a former student, so that was also a nice surprise. Shortly after that, my two bandmates showed up to join me. We set up and chatted for a bit before it was time to start playing at 6 p.m. These two are probably my closest musical allies and two of my best friends. Our group, Stuck on Blue, plays a lot of original music, but we also do plenty of jobbing gigs like this, playing standards and background music. This gig ended up being a pretty great time, and by the third set, we had to pivot out of the jazz background vibe and kick things up a bit for the guest asking us to play something more danceable. We played up until 9 p.m., and knowing my third gig was slated to start at 9:30, I knew I wouldn't have time to pack up and tear down from this gig. So luckily our bassist Jake agreed to take all of the drums and my guitar amp back to my house for me after this gig was over, so that both the guitar player and I could haul as fast as we can over to the final gig.
What not to do when you got 3 gigs? Number 5, you won't believe.
Once 9 p.m. hit, and I mean like immediately as 9 p.m. hit, I hauled right out the side door, down the stairs, and into my car to head back to the Pain, where I'd meet up with the rest of the band for the Gala. Somehow, I avoided getting stopped at any traffic lights and found a decent parking spot and managed to get over to the final gig around 9:15 p.m. Once I got in, I was greeted by the rest of the bandmates waiting for Calvin and I so we could get started right at 9:30. During the second gig, I was actually texting all of the guys in the Pocket Kings for the inputs to plug their mics into on my digital board to help save time. And since we use this system regularly, the presets mostly work without much tinkering or a sound check before we play in a new room. We started right at 9:30 and went on to play 2 sets until midnight. This was a great show, and as much as you'd think I'd get tired or wear out a bit from the long day, I felt more juiced and amped up at this point than at any other point in the day, based off how great the crowd was and the energy on stage playing with one of my favorite bands. Once the gig was done, it was time to pack it all up and call it a night. As the drummer and band leader, I usually end up being the last person on site, packing up and tearing down, but somehow the close second always ends up being our sax player Eric, with all his gear like a saxophone, an iPad, and one mic. When I'm really moving quickly, I can get the drums, PA, lights, all packed up in maybe 40 minutes. But when I'm not too concerned about hauling to the next gig, it usually gets packed up in about an hour. So once I had everything torn down, I could haul it back over to my car and head to drive home for the final time and call it a day. All in all, it ended up being a fun and profitable day, and what might seem like an exhausting day of work to some was a day filled with inspiring music and great hangs with friends for me. I pulled back into my driveway around 1:15 a.m. and decided the final task of putting all this stuff away could wait until tomorrow morning. So the next day, after sleeping in a bit later than usual, I finally got all this gear unloaded and back where it belongs. 3 gigs, 6 sets, nearly 7 hours of playing, 3 to 4 hours of packing up and hauling gear, along with 90 minutes of commuting. Didn't leave much time for anything else, but it was totally worth it considering 2 of these gigs were the corporate private event type, aka big money gigs. If someone were to ask me to share some wisdom about gigging at this frequency, here'd be my few pieces of advice. 1, plan ahead and plan for things to go off script. Don't accept a gig if it's realistically not going to work. The worst thing you could do is let down your bandmates or a client by trying to force a gig into your schedule that just won't add up when it comes to the travel or setup. 2, when it comes to the gear you use, pack what you need and pack extra, but try to be selective about the equipment that may be overkill or unnecessary. And try to find equipment that streamlines your setup and teardown. 3, don't try to vlog about your crazy day of gigging. I somehow made this all work, and it was a good chance to use my new GoPro, but for how busy this day was, trying to make sure I filmed every part of it sure didn't make it any more efficient. If you've got any experience with crazy gigging days like this, leave a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel to stay up to date for future video releases. Until next time, thanks.